In fourth grade, I met John Sheska. He did like The Stinky Cheese Man and The True Story of the Three Little Pigs. And those were like some of my favorite books. And so he did a school visit at the elementary school that my mom worked at. And she let me skip school. And I got to go and I got to like see his presentation. And he was just so much fun. I just thought he was the funniest person I'd ever met. I brought my book for him to sign. And I told him at the time, I was like, I'm going to be a writer when I grow up. And he was like, oh, really? He's like, well, are you writing now? And at the time I was like, yes. But I was like, oh, yeah, I write. You know, I have fun drawing and writing. He's like, then you're a writer now. And I was just like, oh, John Sheska thinks I'm a writer? Like it like opened my brain and my heart. And I was just like, I felt so seen and all the ways that just spoke, you know, to my core and just gave me just sort of the confidence to be like, yes, I am a writer. I'm Emmy Kastner, and I am an author and illustrator of books for kids. You know, picture books generally, they say 4 to 7, but picture books are for everyone. My middle schooler, my high schooler, everyone in my house still enjoys picture
Are they the
books.
toughest critics, you think?
I mean, it's really hard to impress them. They're like, oh, okay, cool, another book. My students would be like, you should make a book. And I'd have them make books in our classroom, and I'd bring in picture books. I taught high school, but we brought in picture books. I feel like it's such an elevated way to tell a story with visuals and marrying that with text to make meaning. And so, yeah, I had my students do it all the time. And finally I was like, okay, I should do this.
What was your first book?
My first published book in the world that you can buy at a bookstore would be the first book in the Nerdy Babies series called Space. It was like a nice sort of jump into the book world as a science teacher, a former science teacher. I was like, oh, it'd be really cute if kids were just reciting science facts. I was like, oh, there should be a book like that. And I was like, I don't really know a book like that yet. And so then I just like took my own advice because I'm constantly like, write that story, tell me that story. And so I was like, I gotta write that story. So that was my first one.
So you begin with a series.
Yeah.
Nerdy Babies?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where'd that come from?
Well, yeah, so when my agent took the book to publishers, there was a lot of interest, which was exciting and very new and surprising. And so it went to auction between the few houses, publishing houses, and they all wanted like 4 books. And I was just like, I just have 1 written right now, but I have other ideas. And I think that's how we had pitched it. Like, it could be a series. So yeah, that kind of started it. And I didn't want to just make science books. Lots of other ideas. So from there, the ball started rolling.
And then there is So Tortoise Dug?
Yes. So that book, So Tortoise Dug, is about a little mouse and a little tortoise who are friends. They're based on real animals. There's a gopher tortoise and a Florida mouse, and they are burrow mates. And I was actually researching for a spread in Nerdy Babies Rocks, and I needed a cutaway of like an underground situation. And I was like, I want an animal that maybe we don't know lives in a burrow. So I was just doing some research and I found the gopher tortoise, and I was like, they're a keystone species, and like over 300 animals share a burrow. And it's like snakes and skunks and bunnies and like mole skinks and moths and like all these animals. And I was just like, what? It was so fascinating. And so I read this like scientific article that said, so the Florida mouse and the gopher tortoise have been burrow mates for millions of years. And sometimes the Florida mouse goes to visit the armadillo, but they always come back. And I was like, oh, that's its own story. So it's really the story of this Florida mouse and this gopher tortoise, and there's a visit to an armadillo.
All the research that you do.
Yeah.
How do you do this? Do you sit at your studio in silence and write, or what's your...
You know, I'm all over the place. So much of my writing just sort of I think about things a lot, and kind of like we'll talk through ideas. My husband, I'm always like telling him an idea for a book and like working through what it would be. I've got some good friends who are always lending an ear. So kind of happens a lot. And then when I'm like sitting down and writing, like that happens by my computer, sure. But sometimes I'm like also inspired by like figuring out the look or the style or the way into the story. So I bounce around a lot.
Yes.
I've got a few stations in my studio here where I do that. So this is an illustration of Arnold Lobel as a pencil from my book called Outside In and the Inside Out, which is a picture book biography of Arnold Lobel. So he wrote and illustrated the Frog and Toad series, probably what he's most famous for, and nearly 100 books. And I was obsessed with him as a kid and as a young adult, and now as someone who makes books. He's just one of my favorites. So making a book about his life was just so exciting, and finding out how to like make art for this book. All my books are very different as far as my style and process go. Here, when he was making art, he used watercolor, ink, and pencil. And so I use acrylic gouache. That's kind of like my through line of all my different books that I'm doing. So this book is acrylic gouache, pen, and pencil. So he was a guy who really loved the silly and the absurd, and I wanted my book to reference that a lot. So every page of this book is some sort of reference to one of his books, whether it be in composition. There's Easter eggs everywhere, characters. This was actually the last thing I painted for the book. I was trying to figure out how to make this page a little more exciting, and so I was just kind of feeling stuck, and I was like, oh, I need ideas. And my husband, I had mentioned this book called Merry Merry February, and one of his books that I hadn't seen yet. And in all my research, I saw most of his books, and so I'm past my deadline of making this book, and I was just like, I gotta finish it. I don't know what to do. And this book shows up on our doorstep, Merry Merry February, and the last page of the book is a pencil with a face on it. And this spread is about him finding the words to tell his stories, because he thought of himself as an accomplished illustrator and a, sort of accidental writer. And so this page in my book is about him finding the words to tell his stories. And so making him a pencil just kind of felt pretty perfect and exciting. Since he was such a sort of nervous writer, he talks about how he would just sit in his favorite chair. He had like a specific notebook and a specific pen that he would use to write the words, or a pencil, and he would chew on the pencils. So there are some little bite marks in this pencil to honor the nervous writer that Arnold Lobel was.
What else do we need to know about Emmy Kastner?
I don't know, like, what do we need to know? My favorite part, probably outside of just making books and the creative process and what that looks like. I mean, you know, it's so much fun working with my editor and my art director and like shaping a book and really like, you know, making it ready to be a finished product that you can hold in your hands. But outside of that creative process, I have so much fun doing school visits, and that is such a huge part of the job where I'm going into schools. I have fun presentations, doing interactive games and drawings and reading the books and just getting kids excited about books, because that happened for me. I mean, I was little. The preschool I went to was in a library, and I just loved being around books like Frog and Toad and Amelia Bedelia and like all these books as a kid just meant the world to me. And so I was a kid who was like, I'm going to be a writer. And I started writing stories as a kid. In fourth grade, I typed out a book called The Bear Who Came Alive. So
Is that on the shelf?
No, no, I think it's in my parents' attic. So now it's just full circle. And me doing those school visits, it's just so exciting to connect. I love being around kids, and I love being creative with kids. And yeah, that's my favorite part, probably.
I bet you just recently changed some fourth graders' pursuit in life. Emmy, keep up your good work. Thank you for you, and the coffee's great. Let's go have another
Cheers.
cup. Cheers.
Thank you.
Be sure to find us on YouTube and Instagram. Exclusive videos, extended content, and behind-the-scenes pictures. Just search Kalamazoo Lively Arts.